Welcome to the August 2026 campaign. And today we're going to be unpacking a lot of the legal decisions and permitting decisions that have been rolling in lately. So we're going to be starting off with Laura Berglund from Earthjustice. She's going to just be unpacking all the recent decisions that have happened, including the Eagle decision, and then also the most recent Michigan Supreme Court decision. So Laura, if you want to hop on, I think we're ready to go.
I'm ready. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Laura Berglund. I'm a senior attorney with Earthjustice in the Tribal Partnerships Program, and very delighted to be joining you here tonight. I'm going to start with the Eagle permit, and I thought maybe I'd sort of walk through some of the highlights of that permit so folks would understand some of the conditions in there and some of the things that Eagle will be continuing to work on. So Eagle issued what they call the joint permit decision on July 15th, 2026. That's out of the Water Resources Department. And that's under both Part 303, the Wetlands Protection, and Part 325, the Great Lakes Submerged Lands Act under the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Under that Part 303 of NREPA, Eagle considered whether the activity was in the public interest, and also noted in the permit itself that there was a significant amount of new information that was not available in the last permit. Just sort of an update on where we're at on the permit. Yeah, so back on the 15th, Eagle had sent out what is effectively a draft permit. We understand now Enbridge has actually signed and returned that permit as of late last week, I believe. So again, that permit grants both the 303, the Wetlands Permit, and the 325 Great Lakes Submerged Lands Act. The authorized activity under that permit are to fill, grade, and place structures within 1.53 acres of coastal wetlands. That's an increase over the last permit that we went through, and to place a water intake structure on 0.17 acres of Lake Michigan submerged land. Now, I think I'll go through some of the conditions that Eagle set out in the permit that there might be some interest in. One of the ones I wanted to note, I don't know if you're following along on some of the inadvertent returns issues that have been happening on Bad River Band. There is a provision here for if drilling muds escape, if they settle on any of the gravel or the rock substrate, it provides for vacuuming to remove that bentonite from the substrate, and an alert system as well is contained in that condition. There's also a condition that there should be no work or dredging within the water from October 15th through November 30th for the spawning, migration, or recreational use permits periods. In the permit, there were a couple of sort of different mitigation plans that we don't see frequently in these. There is typically a wetlands mitigation plan, but it's generally a part of the permit up front. Here, they've given Enbridge an additional period of time through December 31st to work further on a wetland mitigation and monitoring plan. So that the way that's going to work is they're going to have to submit that to Eagle before any activities under the permit would be allowed. So they're going to need to approve this mitigation plan. And there's one other mitigation plan that I'll talk about in a little bit before any activities are allowed under the permit. So again, that would need to be completed by December 31st, 2026. The permit also recognizes that the tunnel project will have adverse effects on cultural resources. And in fact, in the findings of fact, it says that it really will have a significant impact on these resources. And as a condition of the permit, there needs to be this mitigation for cultural resources. Of course, I think a lot of the tribal nations believe that these impacts cannot be mitigated, but this mitigation plan, again, would need to be submitted to Eagle by December 31st, 2026, and Eagle has committed to review this plan in coordination and consultation with the tribal nations and other state agencies such as SHPO. And again, the Enbridge would need to have approval of this cultural resources mitigation and monitoring plan before they're allowed to undertake any activities under the permit. So I just want to note, although I've said this date of December 31st, 2026, either of those plans could be submitted and approved earlier than December 31st, 2026. And if they were approved by Eagle, then potentially activity could happen under the permit prior to that date. But we do have this other provision that's included here, and it's that the permit, any activities under the permit are not allowed to go forward if and until there's all of these following permits are both issued and not enjoined by a court. So the list is the Michigan Public Service Commission siting permit, which of course we just had a decision on, and that will be going back through the process again. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources Threatened and Endangered Species permit of NAREPA, which was similarly issued on July 15th. So that one's been issued. And Eagle's MPDS permit, that's going to be issued, it looks like in the fall at this point. And then the Army Corps of Engineers, Section 10 under the Rivers and Harbors Act and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. And that decision could be issued any day now. I think now I'll move to the MPSC decision.
And I just told people that if they want to drop questions as they come in, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll get to them during Q&A if that's okay.
Sure, sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. So on July 31st, the state Michigan Supreme Court vacated the Michigan Public Service Commission's approval of the tunnel project based on the commission's violations of MEPA, the Michigan Environmental Protection Act, and failure to consider the public trust doctrine. The court has now remanded the case back to the Public Service Commission to properly address potential pollution from the project, conduct an honest assessment of the alternatives, and consider the impact on public trust resources. We consider this a resounding victory, and for now, the project is going to be stopped in its tracks until that process can begin again and get completed. It's worth noting, too, that the court's landmark decision on this is one of the most positive and consequential NEPA decisions since the 1970s. MEPA is a groundbreaking and revolutionary law. It was the world's first environmental citizen suit statute, and it was then copied by states across the country. MEPA also imposes substantive obligations on agencies. It prohibits the approval of conduct that pollutes or destroys natural resources if there's an alternative. But unfortunately, we've seen it weakened by a series of unfavorable court decisions over many decades. So this court sets forth clear and forceful MEPA framework for all of Michigan's agencies going forward. And it makes clear that appellate courts must review MEPA issues de novo rather than deferring to the agency's decision, which reversed a critical error by the Court of Appeals, which had reviewed that underlying agency decision by the PSC under a more deferential statute. This has been a long, winding battle since the outset of the contested case, first in the fall of 2020. Enbridge successfully limited the scope of issues to be reviewed and that universe of alternatives that to be considered. So now, consistent with the instructions from the Supreme Court, we expect to have the opportunity to present to the MPSC much more evidence, including information about oil spills along the length of Line 5, the expected life of the existing pipeline without the approval of the tunnel, and robust information about feasible and prudent alternatives to the tunnel project. And then finally, turning to the Army Corps of Engineers. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is continuing to review Enbridge's permit under Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Its review is including an environmental impact statement under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. The EIS has been released, and the Corps is evaluating 4 options: no action, tunnel construction, gravel rock cover, and horizontal direction drilling, but did not explore alternatives outside the Great Lakes. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the record of decision is really expected at any time now. I think that's it.
Thank you, Laura. I think before we move on, there's one question in the chat that pertains just to what you just talked about. So I think maybe we'll do that real quick. It's Anne asked, does the revocation of the MPSC permit mean that the Eagle permit is no longer in effect because the tunnel hasn't been approved?
No, the Eagle permit is going to stay in effect, but the activities that are approved by the Eagle permit will not be allowed to proceed until they have all of the permits. Enbridge has all of the permits. And at this point, we believe the MPSC permit will take the longest in time to achieve, probably at least a year or so at this point.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I think we'll move on to our next speaker. We have Dr. Nicole Kiwe-Biber, who's going to speak on the tribal perspectives and give some insight into both the permits as well. Thank you,
All
Nicole.
right. Sure. Ani Baju, Nicole Dadishnikas, Wakanakisino Danishna Bekwe, Michigedodem, Nikwejang Dojaba. So yeah, I'm Nicole. I'm a tribal citizen of the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa. And really glad to say like we're among the 4 tribal nations, because those are our homelands, who brought which contested the case along with Side Bay Mills, Grand Traverse Bay, and Narosat Bay Huron Band of Potawatomi. So when I'm thinking about the tribal perspective, so like my degree, my education is, I have my degree in English, and, so that's like a real close look at language. And I, specifically, considered, how Anishinaabe-Mowen, our native language, interacts with English and what that sort of says about, world philosophies. And, so, just looking at this decision, and, I recommend everyone read it. It's really pretty riveting, and really powerful language. And, so something that stood out to me is the mention of a failure to, quote, factually and proximately consider the environmental impact of the conduct, and a failure to factually and proximately consider whether line 5 extending the operational life of line 5 would add additional environmental harm. So that kind of failure to factually and proximately, so basically like rooted in the real world and what happens on the ground, consider impacts. It really spoke to me as kind of like what's been the pattern since initial contact, between these, between the peoples, who, were here, Anishinaabe as, kind of caretakers of the lands and waters, and then, the newcomers. So, thinking in terms of like a kind of philosophical depth, at a linguistic level, our language, it's an accretive language, right? Which basically means every syllable means something. And so the communication is decided by what is actually the shared reality that is being spoken of, right? So like kind of factual and proximate, right? What's happening in the place where our communication is springing from, where we are, equally dependent upon and therefore equals, in terms of our dependency and our responsibilities on the land. So, that really stood out to me with in terms of like the legal term of de novo, it really made me think of considering something anew in terms of like what's the reality at hand? What are the facts on the ground in terms of is this going to do damage, right? And how for, centuries now, this kind of urge to have the consideration be extractive and what can be gained by parties like maybe over here, and if we even think of the English language itself is kind of like it's not accretive, right? It's like the definitions are set over here, kind of a language of conquest, when it comes down to it, this sort of world roving thing, it all, kind of came together, this hybrid. But in terms of when decisions are made over here, like a treaty was made over here, Washington, decided this over here, it was kind of inconceivable because it's like, what does that have to do with the reality on the ground? What does that have to do with how, our medicines are going to be impacted or how fish are going to be impacted or, any manner of other more than human relatives? So, that kind of failure to consider the realities and the kind of impacts. As I said, it's been a pattern that kind of necessitated, right, what MIPA comes from, right? When we think about any environmental protection, it's only since the 70s, basically, right? So like 20 plus years after this pipeline was originally said, like, oh yeah, sure, gonna make some money on it, go for it, sort of thing, and so at the time of kind of realizing like, wait, we need to really consider what it is we're doing and the real impacts on the ground. We see that happen when we're in very dire straits, in the 70s with rivers catching on fire, et cetera. And I think it's really moving to have this powerful decision come down at this time when we're kind of in dire straits, right? This effort to really roll back any kind of tempering of what industry demands is, necessary for their short-term profits just to sort of keep going. The only long-term plan that industry seems to have is to keep making their short-term profits, right? Day after day, which is, certainly comes through in their continued trespass, with running the oil through Line 5 in general. So, with the call for like the non-deferential standard of review, I really like that what matters in that is whether, and this is quoting it, the conduct at issue is likely to pollute, impair, or destroy the air, water, or other natural resources or the public trust in these resources, right? So Laura was saying, right, like this really fortifies MIPA, the environmental protection, in a really powerful and much needed way. And maybe when I think fortifies, really it kind of acknowledges the purpose of it, right? Undiluted, no longer diluted by sort of the real kind of power grab and very moneyed kind of machine behind this big oil ultimately, but these large industry interests. So this clear intention of the words that have already been agreed upon. What is this supposed to mean, right? It's supposed to be considered fresh every time of the purpose of it is clear, right? To have it be the considering the conduct, if the conduct of the issue, right, is likely to pollute, impair, et cetera. So, when I think about the clear intention of words agreed upon, that certainly, connects to tribal treaty rights. And when we think of, what our ancestors made sure was included, the right to hunt, fish, gather, and enjoy. Oh, sorry, I'm on something. Enjoy like all the usual privileges of occupancy. that's a really powerful, I think, carefully conceived of phrase, particularly considering this was still the point when these treaties were developed of bilingual, the Anishinaabe language is still very much alive. People first language speakers, but also became, able to speak in English. So the consideration of how something is phrased is really carefully done, right? And really particular to the circumstances on the ground. And so when we think of all the usual privileges of occupancy. I'd like to recommend here President Bay Mills, Whitney Gravel, her article. She has a few recent ones in Native News Online. One I'm thinking of now is where she specifically is speaking about the Army Corps decision and how it really, is kind of an interrogation moment for what the treaty rights are supposed to engender in terms of decision making and in terms of what it means to really hold true to the clear intention of the words that are there, right? Which is sort of what the Supreme Court, as mentioned, is really demanding is done for MIPA. So, I want to recommend that because when we think about, again, in the Supreme Court's language, Michigan Supreme Court's assessing the scope of the harms, right? Our ancestors, when these treaties were conceived of and signed and collaborated on and agreed to, really were assessing the scope of what's necessary to our lifeways, right? And that's in accord with our responsibility as stewards, our responsibility to whitefish, to all of these teachings, but also to the next 7 generations, who we are, right? We're at the point, if we're, counting the years and the generations, we're the ones they were thinking of. So it's really powerful to kind of have this confirmation that words matter. The clear purpose of the words, it's an agreement with kind of our shared reality, right? And so, the kind of decision making being inclusive even of future generations is the norm for our cultural lifeways. And we're really radically inclusive, in our kind of understanding of how decisions are made, to where you would make sure, it would be certain that, not only like elders and women, are all clear and included, but also children and babies, really important for them to be present because you're not going to make a good decision if you don't have those voices right there, right? Informing what it is you're actually reckoning, what it really means, like the reality at hand and what's being included. So, in terms of the recognition that feasible and prudent alternatives weren't really fully considered or really fairly, not in a way that was kind of consistent. For example, something that stood out to me was like, oh, they talked about what might happen if a rail line broke, but they didn't talk about what would happen if some of the other 641 miles of the pipeline broke, right? So really an inconsistency there, but also in terms of what about the alternative shutting down Line 5? That's a feasible, prudent alternative, right? So my hope is that we get another chance to really like uplift that as absolutely a feasible and prudent alternative to be considered to like remove that threat, right? We need to avoid and kind of reject harm at the onset of these things, right? That's what ideally these permits should be looking at, but it's been so captured by like the kind of corrupting industry interests, right? That it's kind of basically like, oh, okay, check, rubber stamp. Well, Anishinaabe, the tribal leaders, we're not willing to be a box to be checked. They'd love to treat us that way. That's the effort, time after time, but we're not willing to do that, And so, when I think about kind of avoiding and rejecting the harm at the onset and how important that is and how really rational that is, right? It's really kind of the reasonable approach, the prudent approach. And we have there's the figure of the Wendigo, right, in our teachings, and it's just this insatiable monster of greed. And the more they eat, the larger and hungrier and more emaciated they also become. The tinier the heart, the more frozen, right? And so, this insatiability, despite the harm being done, really it called to mind when it was mentioned with that June 15th decision of the water permit. That was devastating because it meant, oh, your ancestors are going to be dug up, and the plan is we'll let you deal with it, right? We'll let Enbridge do that, but hey, you can deal with it. So, it was devastating. And just 2 days later, on the 17th, was when we couldn't even go outside and breathe the air because of that wildfire smoke of the failure, absolutely linked to the failure to care for the forest the way that, uh, tribal nations have been doing for millennia, but also as parcel to the climate crisis and the droughts, the heat, etc. So this insatiability to gain despite the harms done, very much Wendigo behavior, right? Of this kind of like extractive corporate, short-term profit forever, irreconcilable with the continuation of life capitalist, system. So I think that it's really a critical time right now for us to hold fast and be steadfast in our connections to reality, right? Water is life. That's a real basic reality. It can't really be argued with in any manner that's in good faith, right? That's the place that we need to begin with our shared understanding of the ones who are here, but equally dependent upon the living earth and waters. So, it's a real relief that this has brought important time and ideally a chance to have the truth, be what's ascendant in the decision making, the ultimate decision making as we can shut this down. We need to shut it down. The rest of the world is leaving us behind going into renewable energy anyways, right? But there's so much work to be done. We're done pushing back against these threats, right? We need to, and we need to do it at the same time, but we'd love to be able to focus on the recovery and the healing of the living world, right? Of bringing our species home. We'd love to have that be where our energy is going, so the digging up our ancestors being avoided, that's very important to us, that's a sacred place there at the Straits of Michilimackinac, because those ones are at rest, but also thinking about those ones that are living, right? Those ones that are living there, the more than human relatives, they are also sacred. This is what all of our hearts really require and our spirits require. Anishinaabe and that we all feel that love. We feel our responsibility, and I'm just really grateful to everyone here who cares and is going to continue to stand side by side. So, miigwech.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for your awesome insights. And I think I'm going to pass it to Sam, who's been moderating the chat. And we'll get into a little bit of Q&A before we get into next steps. So I'm going to pass it over to Sam.
Hey, everybody. I just want to invite, if there's been a question that you haven't put in the chat yet for Laura related to the Supreme Court decision that you might want to ask, just to invite you to do so. And in the meantime, I can ask an initial question, and I think it's something that's on a lot of our minds. Just wanting you to describe a little bit more about how this ruling addresses the public trust, like beyond Line 5, including Line 5, right? But potentially beyond Line 5, and how that might affect other environmental issues to come.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're still taking a look at that. I think the agencies at Michigan's various departments are taking a look at that as well. So I think it's going to be more to come, but I think it's certainly something that folks are taking a look at. I mean, really, as well as the MEPA as well. I think we're hearing from agencies that they're taking a look at that and trying to see, how it's going to impact, this decision is going to impact their decisions moving forward. So I think more as time moves on.
Yeah, when with reading this and thinking about like the potential, for there to be actually like functional kind of consideration and real power of what public trust should be. Um, I mean, I think it'd be wonderful for public trust to be like a real common phrase among people to like really, be part of like the movement. People are saying like, respected. That means us. We're all like, caretakers and beneficiaries of what that means. So, the more we can, kind of add to the foundation of the importance of that by our own awareness and our own kind of embracing that that's something that's accorded to us by law, by understanding, by intention, precedent. I think that that can only be good and really, is a way that just another piece of language and touchstone for expressing how we're all, all always already connected, by the water and our shared kind of dependency upon Earth.
Well, I want to invite anyone else to come off mute rather if there's a question on their heart about the
Um,
Supreme Court. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I see one in the chat about which justices were voted in favor. So in favor were Justice Welch, Chief Justice Kavanaugh, and Justices Bernstein, Bolden, Thomas, and Hood. And Zahara concurred in part and dissented in part. Um, Dissented on the pieces saying that the PSC, the Public Service Commission, should have had more deference given to its decision, and the scope of NEPA that the majority decided on, but concurred on the public trust piece.
Oh, looks like we've got another question from Calvin.
Oh, if I said the MPSC's permit's likely to be granted, I misspoke. I think that this is a redo. And we think that the process might take about a year, but if we're able to put in all of our the scope of analysis that we're talking about, we're certainly hopeful for a better decision.
And we see another question from Carol. Laura, I wonder if you would like to answer that, and then perhaps other people can chime in as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think folks can, if you want to weigh in terms of letters of the editor, that sort of thing, reaching out to political folks. I think those are still options. The Army Corps hasn't made a decision yet, although we're expecting that quite soon. I think folks can still reach out if they choose to, but pass it along to other folks and might have other ideas.
And this might be a good time to segue into Bill's portion of tonight. He is going to talk about our organizing next steps. So I think that might be a good segue into that. We have some upcoming events and an action that you can all take tonight if you'd like. So I will turn it over to Bill if he is. Oh, there you are.
We have several things going on. What can you do? First of all, there's another webinar a really exciting one that's happening next Thursday, the 20 or Tuesday, the 20th, is it? Is it Tuesday? Thursday, the 20th, at noon. And this is put on by Flow Water Advocates and Oil and Water Don't Mix. They're going to go into really deep into what this Supreme Court ruling means. And we're excited to have, well, first of all, Liz Kirkwood, the executive director of Flow, is going to be moderating. But Riaz Kanji, who is the founding member of his law firm, and he represented the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and Flow Water Advocates, and especially, he was pivotal in that Supreme Court oral argument and the case. Debbie Chiswer, who is an attorney with Earth Justice, and Laura, I'm sure you know her well, and also David Holtz from Oil and Water Don't Mix. He has written a couple really great things on. He's done a real deep dive into what these things mean. And if you have a chance, and maybe I can ask somebody to put this in the chat, but his recent Substack article is just terrific. It really outlines what happened at the Supreme Court and sort of charts a path going forward. So also, if somebody could put in the chat now the link to register to the Flow webinar, which is happening next Thursday, the 20th. Other events. So there's going to be a rally at the Capitol on Wednesday, August 26th. And this is put on by the Anishinaabe caucus or a group, mostly Native-led. Dr. Nicole will be there, Andrea Pierce, and then also Beth Wallace with National Wildlife Federation, Brian O'Mara, who is one of our leading experts in terms of like a geologic or a tunnel engineer. So he knows all about the issues with the tunnel. Someone from MyCan will be there, not Dr. Keel, but I believe maybe Sam or Amanda maybe are going to be there. Sam, is that you're going to be speaking there? And that should be a nice couple-hour event. And the more people that could turn out to really show support would be tremendous. So take a look at that. We can share this by email after the call, like in the morning. We can give you this detail so you know where and when to show up. Then next, Water Weekend. There are 4 different events happening. And I'll give you the outline, but Sam, you can jump in here after I'm done and kind of say maybe a word about them. But this is something that has been going on for several years now, and they've all sort of morphed into these really great events, also Native-led. There's on Friday the 4th, well, I won't read them all, but you can see them all right there, right? There's a potluck and a feast and an open mic on Friday, and then the big day, the Pipe Out Paddle protest, this time in Petoskey, and then the Water is Life Festival in the afternoon in Petoskey, and then Sunday, a bunch of events, and then people are going to be gathering for the Mackinac Bridge Walk, starting on the south side, and it's really hard to make an impact there, but the more people, the better. If you have one of those shutdown or no Line 5 oil tunnel shirts, that's always great to wear to that event. If you have an Oil Water Don't Mix hat, if you don't have one, go to the website and you can get your own there to the oilandwaterdon'tmix.org/store. And those are the upcoming events that you should really check out. Sam, do you want to add anything to that Water Weekend?
Sure. If you guys have never been before, it's really a special weekend. It's a time to spend quality time with people from around the state and also Wisconsin and Minnesota who care about water, right? There's a big blanket of things going on, but the heart of it is Line 5 for sure. And there's a Give Butter link right there. So that's a really easy way to get some more information about the weekend, register to camp or donate. The Bridge Walk is going to be really exciting this year. We're going to have some people that are good at social media and comms, clowning around, creating creative content with the hope of making some viral videos like Bill is really skilled at doing. So there's kind of something for everyone. There's many chances to volunteer. It's just $20 to camp. So go ahead and go to that page. Feel free to invite others. Thanks for bearing with us with all the information on that flyer. There's about to be a new flyer that will get released that's much more simple that you can send along to somebody that doesn't know about this weekend already and maybe is out of state. So stay posted for that. That will come out soon. And we usually focus our efforts on the south side of the bridge. Kathy, I just saw your question. But if there's capacity, we can do both. And we have done both in the past. So there's an email associated with this Give Butter that we'll send more information out on. Although I know Oil and Water will be a great resource as well. So let's see here. I think there is another question. And maybe this is for Laura by Carol.
Sure, I can take that. Yeah, I think the real problem with their analysis was that they bought into Enbridge's argument that the consideration of the proposal should be limited to the replacement tunnel project, and that the rest of the pipeline's length and the products that run through it were really irrelevant because Line 5 would continue to operate regardless of whether the tunnel is built. So I think that was really the sort of the core of the problem, was really this sort of myopic view. The Supreme Court has now said that on remand that the harms asserted beyond that conduct itself must also be examined, and the PSA must look at all of these other harms and allow this other evidence in that was discarded the first time around. So hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have one action that we can all take today. I'm going to put the screen up here. So if someone could put this in the chat. Governor Whitmer finished the job. The Supreme Court ruling, I think, hopefully should be a wake-up call to our politicians to really look at the public trust, to really get back to the work of shutting down the pipeline, because it's all been about the tunnel for such a long time. We've lost fact that there's a pipeline sitting in the water right now, and it could be struck by an anchor tonight. So we really need to get Governor Whitmer to get back on the job, finish what she started, continue to work on that revocation, continue to work on moving her agencies to do the right thing the next time a permit comes up, because that is coming. So look in the chat there. I'm sure someone added that. Whitmer finished the job. Go ahead and take action at this one. And we also really need your help to spread this around, because this kind of thing works best when we get thousands and thousands of people sending her emails saying, hey, let's finish it. And I will leave it there for Lila.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and for all of our speakers. I want to just we have about 10 minutes, so I just want to make sure I open the floor in case there's any last minute questions. I did just put the finish the job action alert in the chat, but I'll just drop it one more time so it's the last thing. But yeah, any questions before we end our night and wrap up? You can either come off mute or feel free to put in the chat. See.
And while folks are putting any last things in the chat or coming off mute, I'll just mention what I put in the chat, that during the bridge walk over Water Weekend, which is also Labor Day, we typically focus on vending on the south side of the bridge instead of walking the bridge, because you can't carry signs and people don't really want to talk. But we engage a lot of people in conversation as vendors by having fun things like selfie station, water address map, and etc. And it's a nice segue to have a conversation about what's under the bridge. So that'll be happening along with some smaller groups of comms people that are coming up with creative, engaging content. And yes,
there is a question in
go
the
ahead.
chat. There is a question. What will it mean when President Trump declares Line 5 to be a national security issue? Anybody care to take that?
Yeah.
He declares a lot of things.
Yeah, he declares a lot of things. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thank you.
All right. Well, it looks like the
Well-
other question from Emily was addressed by Nicole directly in the chat. So yeah, I just want to highlight that our next campaign briefing will be September 8th. So please go to the Oil and Water Don't Mix website, and I will drop that as well in the chat, the sign up for that. And we'd love to have you back in September. I can't believe it's already almost mid-August. Time is flying. All right. Any last minute thoughts before we head out? Thanks again to our speakers and for everyone who was here today to celebrate a really big win from the MPSC. From the Michigan Supreme Court.
Foreshadowing, let's hope.
Yeah,
Maybe
seriously.
maybe they get it right this time.
Right?
Yes, and just letting people know, it'd be really great to see you at the Capitol on the 26th from 11 to 1. It's kind of rare. If you look at the flyer, we're having, asking Eagle staffs to be there, our pipe carriers, drums, etc. It's kind of rare we gather our cultural important items like that outside of ceremony, but I think it really speaks to the importance of, us reaffirming how we are standing unanimous and in solidarity as water protectors. So really hope to see you all there.
Awesome. And I see, Doug, you have your hand up. Do you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I'm the one that asked about Trump, and I know he declares a lot, but the reality is we're still running J.H. Campbell coal burner because of his declarations. So, we can. How does that relate? We're right now we're dealing in the Michigan Supreme Court and back to the MSPCS, whatever it is. Anyhow, and so I really see that he can be a real wrench in the spokes, so to speak. And I guess that's probably more of a legal question for Laura and people that understand how the federal. I mean, I don't understand J.H. Campbell still running. If I were running Michigan, I would have shut it down and said, well, too bad. We're not going to run it. It's our choice. So.
Yeah, I can say that, the Line 5 is on the Fast 41 dashboard. It has been designated as part of the Energy Emergency Executive Order. It still went through I'd say a fairly regular type NEPA permitting process. So yeah, I don't know that it'll be designated as any other sort of under any other executive orders, or it certainly could be. But now we're nearly at the end of the federal permitting process, so I'm not sure that it would gain anything in terms of speeding things up, if that's the question.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate you jumping in on that question. And Doug, thank you for asking. I think it's about time to wrap. Carol just asked a quick one. Does Whitmer have the power to shut it down?
I think we certainly think so, right there. That they filed the case over it. We'll to see how it turns out.
All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. I know there's so many questions that can be asked, but I do want to celebrate the Supreme Court win, and thank you all for being here and for your solidarity in this issue. And I hope to see you in September. So thank you again, and thanks to our speakers. Oh, Bill.
Yes, and thank you so much, Laura, for taking time, and Nicole for your good words, and Samantha for helping out. It's a team effort.
It is a team effort. Thank you all.